In today's discussion, we will be examining four key, although lesser known, works by Thomas Paine that showcase the breadth and depth of his intellectual contributions: The American Crisis, Public Good, African Slavery in America, and Agrarian Justice. These works help us to better understand Paine's legacy as a pivotal figure in American political philosophy. Not only did these writings spur the revolution, but they also skewered some ostensibly allied American political elites, earning him some formidable enemies along the way. Let's begin with his inspiring pamphlet series, The American Crisis, that offered a lifeline to the fledgling American Revolution. This work was presented as 13 different parts between 1776 and 1783, with the first part perhaps being the most important. Imagine the demoralized Continental Army in the bitter winter of 1776, with defeat seeming imminent. Desertion was rife, and hope dwindled with each passing day. It was in this bleak atmosphere that Paine, himself a soldier, serving as an aide-de-camp to General Nathanael Greene, penned the first part of The American Crisis. He didn't shy away from acknowledging the gravity of their struggle, famously declaring, "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of his country, but he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman." George Washington himself recognized the power of Paine's words, ordering them to be read aloud to his weary soldiers at Valley Forge a few days before the pivotal Battle of Trenton, sometimes known as Crossing the Delaware. Paine's pamphlet not only bolstered the morale of the Continental Army and patriotic civilians, but it also served to shame neutrals and loyalists into supporting the cause of American independence. In these pamphlets, Paine masterfully combined biblical imagery with Enlightenment ideals, crafting a narrative of divine providence intertwined with the pursuit of self-governance. He didn't shy away from depicting the harsh realities of war, acknowledging the sacrifices demanded of the American people, but always emphasized the ultimate reward: a nation founded on principles of liberty and justice. By appealing to both their reason and emotions, Paine reinvigorated the revolutionary spirit, convincing soldiers and citizens alike to persevere in the face of adversity. As for its legacy, The American Crisis contributed significantly to the formation of a distinct American identity, and its influence continues into the present. By articulating the values and principles underpinning the revolution, Paine helped forge a sense of shared purpose and national unity, presenting a vision of America as a beacon of liberty. Paine's emphasis on natural rights, popular sovereignty, and the right of revolution influenced the development of American political philosophy over the following centuries, while also contributing to the shaping of democratic ideals worldwide. So, after such an auspicious beginning, what did Paine write that soured his relationship with his former brothers in arms? One of these pamphlets was entitled In Public Good, where Paine turned his attention to matters of governance and land ownership in the newly formed United States. Published in 1780, this pamphlet challenged the claims of individual states to Western lands, arguing that they rightfully belonged to the nation as a whole, advocating for a strong central government capable of managing these territories for the benefit of all Americans. This work reflects Paine's commitment to the common good and his belief in a united and powerful republic, foreshadowing the debates over federalism that would shape the early years of the United States, as well as the push for westward expansion. These ideas still fuel debates and conflict today on federal land ownership, especially in the American West. Paine believed that a united nation, guided by a robust central government, was crucial for securing the fruits of independence and ensuring a prosperous future for all. His ideas on a central government and public land ownership did, however, draw the ire of several factions. Wealthy land speculators as the ones who would be most directly affected were perhaps the most vociferous opposition. Wealthy individuals and families, many of them prominent figures like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Richard Henry Lee, had laid claim to vast tracts of Western land based on old colonial charters and grants. Paine's assertion was that these lands belonged to the nation as a whole, not to individuals or individual states, thus directly threatening their potential wealth and power. As you know, threatening the wealthy and powerful elites rarely goes well. This was probably the reason some of these same people declined to come to Paine's aid when he was imprisoned and nearly executed during the French Revolution. However, Paine's ideas in public good were ultimately influential on national policy. The Northwest Ordinance of 1787, which established a process for organizing and admitting new states from the Western territories, reflected his vision of these lands as a national asset. Paine's advocacy for a strong federal government capable of managing national resources and ensuring equitable distribution still fuels debates about the balance of power between federal and state governments. Hot-button issues like environmental and public land use regulations often highlight these tensions. Those favoring greater state autonomy echo the concerns of those who opposed Paine in the 18th century, while those advocating for federal intervention often draw inspiration from his vision of a unified nation working for the collective good. From our modern-day perspective, we might question Paine's support of Western expansion because of the negative effect it had on indigenous people. We do have to consider that Paine was a man of his times, and while he expressed the view that European colonists were often cruel and unjust in their treatment of Native Americans, he also considered them as uncivilized and in need of improvement. Perhaps he saw westward expansion as a necessary and inevitable process for the growth and prosperity of the newly formed nation, but something that needed careful management. In public good, Paine argued that Native Americans should be treated fairly and compensated for the lands they ceded. He proposed that the federal government should purchase land from them at a fair price and use the tax and resale proceeds from this purchase for the benefit of both Native Americans and the nation as a whole. This stance, though not always consistently upheld, reflected some degree of concern for indigenous people's welfare. So what did Paine have to say about the other notable oppressed group at the time, African slaves? Long before abolition became a mainstream movement, Paine raised his voice against the abhorrent institution of slavery in his anonymously published March 1775 Pennsylvania Magazine article entitled African Slavery in America. While the abolitionist essay was unsigned, most historians give Paine credit based on him being an editor of the magazine at the time, as well as the rhetorical style used. The essay stands as an early and powerful condemnation of the institution of slavery, arguing vehemently against the moral depravity of human bondage and calling for its immediate abolition. He exposed the hypocrisy of colonists fighting for their own liberty while denying it to others, laying the groundwork for the future abolitionist movement. Paine's condemnation of slavery, though radical for its time, was deeply rooted in his Enlightenment philosophical ideals. The Enlightenment emphasized the concept of natural rights, the idea that all individuals possess inherent rights that cannot be justly taken away. These rights, which included the right to life, liberty, and property, were considered universal and inalienable. Paine, a staunch advocate of natural rights, saw slavery as a blatant violation of these fundamental principles, arguing that enslaving another human being was an act of tyranny and a denial of their basic human dignity. Of course, these ideas did not sit well with wealthy and powerful individuals who owned slaves, like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. In a 1796 open letter to Washington, Paine's sharp criticisms and increasing disillusionment over the first president's silent inaction in this area reached a crescendo. He felt that Washington had betrayed the ideals of the Revolution by failing to address the issue of slavery and by prioritizing his own interests and those of the slaveholding elite. This frustration led to the letter, followed by a public falling out between the two men, with Paine being ostracized by many former colleagues, further highlighting the deep divide on the issue of slavery. This wasn't Paine's only writing that caused consternation with America's agrarian elites. In his Agrarian Justice pamphlet published in 1797, he addressed what he saw as the growing problem of economic inequality caused by agrarian monopolies holding control of the land. In it, he further developed the ideas he outlined in The Rights of Man, stating that land ownership separated the majority of people from their rightful, natural inheritance and means of independent survival. He proposed a radical solution, a system of social security funded by a ground rent on land ownership. This ground rent, Paine argued, was a societal obligation, a recognition that everyone had a right to a share of the Earth's natural resources. He envisioned this fund providing direct payments to citizens, ensuring a basic standard of living and combating poverty. Agrarian Justice remains a significant work in the history of socio-political and economic thought, serving as the backdrop for modern public policy ideas like Social Security and universal basic income. Critics of Paine's proposal for a ground rent saw it as an infringement on private property rights. Landowners argued that they had a right to the full value of their land, and that taxing it to fund social welfare programs was an unjust violation of their natural rights. This criticism reflected the strong emphasis on individual property rights prevalent in classical liberal thought. Other critics argued that Paine's plan would disincentivize labor and investment. They asserted that providing a basic income to all citizens, regardless of their work status, would discourage people from seeking employment and contributing to the economy, as well as causing indolence. They also argued that taxing landowners would discourage investment in land improvement and development. We see this debate is still with us today, where heated discussions over the extent of social welfare and taxation policies dominate political headlines. So, to wind up this series of videos, I think we can see that Thomas Paine's legacy is one of bold ideas, fearless rhetoric, and an unwavering commitment to liberty and equality. His writings, though often stirring up controversy with their provocative style, played a crucial role in shaping the American Revolution and inspiring ongoing philosophical, theological, and political debates, not only in America, but around the world. Paine's fiery critiques against inherited power and his emphasis on the right of the people to choose their own government resonate with those who challenge entrenched political elites and demand greater accountability from their leaders. Paine's unwavering defense of individual liberties, including freedom of speech, religion, and assembly, remains a cornerstone of modern human rights discourse. Paine's condemnation of slavery and African slavery in America and his advocacy for economic equality and agrarian justice continue to inspire social justice movements today. Paine's ideas about using public resources to address poverty and inequality continue to inform discussions about progressive taxation, universal basic income, and the role of government in providing a social safety net. While it's not a political policy prescription, Paine's powerful and persuasive writing style also continues to influence political rhetoric and discourse. His ability to connect with ordinary people, his use of clear and concise language, and his skillful deployment of emotional appeals remain relevant for contemporary political leaders and activists seeking to mobilize public opinion and effect change. When you see a member of the political elite attempting to act and talk like ordinary folks, often badly, remember, you may have Thomas Paine to thank for it. Well, this winds up our series on Thomas Paine. What do you think of his ideas? Agree or disagree? Or, if you're like me, a bit of both, let me know in the comments. And subscribe to the channel so that you won't miss our upcoming episodes.